Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. All right, so we have some interesting news today. Earlier this morning, you might have noticed that the House kind of issued this surprise update that the House Ethics Committee did indeed vote quietly, albeit quietly, on releasing the ethics report against Matt Gaetz. This came as a surprise because we just assumed that kind of the momentum behind it had died down. It hadn't really been in the news unto itself. Let me fix this real quick. I need to stop giving thumbs up because it kills my camera. So we do already now know that the House Ethics Committee will be releasing this report, and so that remains to be seen. They said that they'll do it later on this year when all the votes are completed. So I don't know if they're trying to do it in such a way that they can bury it under, just this general feeling of people not paying attention and hope that it kind of goes away that way. But in any case, I know a lot of us are going to be anticipating that with bated breath, basically, and we'll dive into every part of what that report ultimately says. But Matt Gaetz had a pretty negative reaction to that, and that was, he had posted on Twitter his response. Let me pull that up right now. And this isn't what I ultimately want to talk about, but I think it's worth discussing real quick. Let's see. Let me just pull this up real quick. There is a world in which he may have actually deleted it. Okay, in any case, let me show you what I actually wanted to show you, because this was the ultimate result of Matt Gaetz coming out and kind of losing his mind over the House Ethics Committee report announcement. And that is, Matt Gaetz said, "Someone suggested the following plan to me. Show up on January 3rd, 2025 to Congress, participate in the speaker election. I was elected to the 119th Congress after all. Take the oath, file a privilege motion to expose every Me Too settlement paid using public funds, even of former members, resign and start my own OANN program at 9 p.m. Eastern on January 6, 2025. So this is effectively Matt Gaetz showing his discontent with this House Ethics Committee. And remember, for the report to have been released, it needed Republican members of the Ethics Committee to have signed on to its release as well. So presumably, the Republican chair of the committee, Michael Gaetz, was one of them. I don't think he's particularly MAGA, although he did bow to pressure from Mike Johnson. But in any case, there did have to be buy-in from Republicans. That was the only way this report was going to get released. There was buy-in from Republicans. And so Gaetz now, feeling no allegiance to a party in a body of Congress that he's no longer a part of, and probably feeling scorned by his own party that voted to release this report against him, feels like, why not just go scorched earth here and take down members of Congress with them? And there had been a lot of allusions to this idea that Republicans have been kind of pilfering this slush fund that they use to just pay off people who had filed sexual assault claims or sexual harassment claims against members of Congress. I did ask Amy Klobuchar about this during a recent interview, and she kind of brushed it aside and said, look, I don't lend a lot of credence to the things that Matt Gaetz says. But remember, these are things that Matt Gaetz has said against his own party. And I don't necessarily think that when he really doesn't have a whole lot of incentive to bluff, that he would be doing it. And by the way, Matt Gaetz has done this to his own party before. Not this specifically, but for example, he outed a member of his own conference, or a Republican lawmaker, outed a Republican lawmaker publicly. And I think that he has, and of course, the most famous example is him basically using his political capital to oust Kevin McCarthy from Congress. And of course, the irony of him using his political capital to oust Kevin McCarthy from Congress, to make him A, lose his speakership, and then B, lead him ultimately to resign, was that the reason he didn't like Kevin McCarthy in the first place is because Kevin McCarthy didn't support Matt Gaetz in this effort to brush his ethics scandal under the rug. So this is all kind of coming back now full circle, wherein Matt Gaetz is continuing to show that the only way he's willing to really flex his muscles here is by attacking people who support this very probe, this very ethics report. We have seen it before where he attacked Kevin McCarthy and basically ended his career in the House of Representatives. And now we're seeing this continue where still, because of the same issue that's been plaguing him, the alleged sexual misconduct with a minor and possible drug use, this same issue is leading him to continue going on his scorched earth retribution tour against anybody who's spoken out against him. And so we may very well be in a position where a former Republican member of Congress is the one who exposes all of these Me Too settlements paid using public funds, including former members, and presumably these are against members of his own party. Although, look, if there's members of the Democratic Party too, fuck it. I have no allegiance. I have no allegiance to any individual member, especially one that's used taxpayer funds to quiet a sexual harassment claim against them. So, look. You're not going to hear me say this very often, but I would be in complete agreement if Matt Gaetz decided to use his post congressional moment, whatever job, to really kind of exact retribution against people who really deserve to be exposed here. I think it's also worth noting when he says that he should show up to January 3rd, 2025 in Congress. He does have the right to do that. He was elected to 119th Congress. Matt Gaetz resigned, but he resigned from this Congress, the 118th Congress. They haven't yet even sworn an oath to the 119th Congress. So the notion that he would be barred from serving in the 119th Congress, it doesn't exist yet. So he still could do this. With that said, if he wants to, let's not pretend that he needs to go through this whole rigmarole in order to accomplish this. He's getting an OAN show. He's going to have a show on One American News. And so if he wants to do this, know full well that he has the ability to do that, whether or not he shows up in January 2025 to Congress. Although I guess the important part would be then he would have the ability to basically draw out the documents themselves, as opposed to just relying on his own testimony if he were to just do it on his show. As a member of Congress, he could use the levers of Congress itself to expose these settlements paid. It would be interesting, too, to see who opts to vote against it. Because I think in some instances, just watching the people who vote against something is pretty telling in and of itself. And the reason I say that is for this reason. So if you take a look at the screen right here, Matt Gaetz, this is from Newsmax, Matt Gaetz was the only lawmaker to vote against the human trafficking bill. And so I think it's pretty telling sometimes when you have certain lawmakers who decide to exercise their ability to vote for or against certain things, and sometimes they tell on themselves, because right now Matt Gaetz is alleged to have done exactly the thing that he voted against revealing, which is that this human trafficking bill in and of itself. And so I think if he were to put forward a privilege motion where he does have the ability to file this privilege motion to expose any settlements paid using public funds, anybody who opted to vote against it, I think would in a way be telling on themselves, and I can't imagine that they would be falling over themselves really to kind of expose themselves in that way, whether advertently or not. So some interesting stuff still to come as far as the Matt Gaetz saga of it all is concerned. But before we heap too much expectation onto Matt Gaetz, I do think it's important to note that the report in and of itself is going to be coming out, and it's not for nothing. A few reasons here. First, this is a taxpayer-funded report. And so there is something to be said for the fact that we paid for it. We have a right to see what this report says. The notion that we have to pay for things that then we don't have the right somehow to see is completely bogus. Second of all, Matt Gaetz' career in politics may very well not be over. There is still a likelihood, I would say, personally, a strong likelihood that he'll run for the gubernatorial seat in Florida after Ron DeSantis is out. So I do think that Gaetz hasn't ended his political career. I think that, as much as I think him watching the third most viewed linear TV program on the right in OAN is gonna be attractive to him, I do think that he probably will kind of feel some need to get in a position of power once again. And so I do think that he'll run for governor. And in doing so, I think that it's incumbent upon Congress to show what it's revealed so that people know when they cast their ballots who it is they're voting for. And it's not just Democrats who have a vested interest in seeing this stuff, because I'm old enough to remember when there was a whole alt-right, far-right QAnon movement predicated on its opposition to people who committed misconduct with minors. That seemed to be a whole driving force behind this movement on the right. And yet now we have the allegation that Matt Gaetz did exactly that. And suddenly you want me to think that A, this is some Democratic scheme against Matt Gaetz, or that B, only Democrats are going to care? If it was Republicans who have been beating their chests for years and years and years about how disqualifying it is for something like what they claim is happening in Washington in pizza places, basements that don't exist, for this to continue happening. And now when there's possibly evidence that Matt Gaetz did exactly that, you want to tell me that these people want to bury their heads in the sand? I think that everybody would have a vested interest in seeing what's happening here. So still a lot to come on the Matt Gaetz front and why it's important to see what this report ultimately uncovers. It's also worth noting, and I think this is kind of some tertiary benefit to all of this, is that what this report does uncover, if it does indeed show that there was some misconduct by Matt Gaetz, if it proves it true, I think what's going to be important here is to show what kind of person it was that Donald Trump wanted to put in charge of the DOJ. And I say that this is the least compelling option because I don't think there's any doubt among normal people what kind of person Trump wants to put in charge of the DOJ. I already, even with these allegations unto themselves, even what we do know about Matt Gaetz that has been proven, it's not exactly clear that this is some beacon of integrity. And so, but if the depths of his perversion really do go as deep as reporting suggests they might, then I think that could be instructive in terms of the kind of people that Trump is surrounding himself with, and will pop this illusion perhaps among some people on the right that this is somebody who's going to like drain the swamp, and you're going to do that by putting into power as the top law enforcement official in the country somebody who may very well have committed sexual misconduct with a minor. That's really how you're going to drain the swamp. And look, I don't think that there's too many people who really are going to make that connection or are going to care, because I think for people who like Donald Trump, they just like Donald Trump, and they're just, there's no real sense of, okay, I'm going to be let's see how I want to put this, depending on who he puts in, that suddenly I'm going to realize that what he was saying was complete bullshit about draining the swamp. Like, I think that they give him full deference in terms of who he puts in anyway, and it's not usually on Democrats who are going to be effective at convincing these Trump supporters. They're just going to believe Trump when he says, I'm going to drain the swamp and I'm going to do it with these criminals. But I still do think that there may be a few people out there for whom that is enough of the last straw, and they're going to be like, really? Dude, this is the guy you wanted to put in as the top law enforcement official in the country. So remains to be seen what happens there. But I do think that the onus is on us to make sure that we make that connection so that it's clear exactly the kind of people that Donald Trump was not only trying to put in power, but anoint to a position that is the top law enforcement official in the United States of America. Although, the cynic in me would say that far from being some disqualifying factor, that committing some atrocities against people is actually a prerequisite in the Trump administration. And I feel like there are more Trump administration nominees than not who have their own sexual misconduct allegations against them at this point. Somebody wrote Pizza Gaetz. I think that pretty much sums it up at this point. Pizza Gaetz. Gaetz. That is that's pretty smart. Okay, so that's where we're at with the Matt Gaetz of it all at this point right now. So I'm getting the comment from Cal here. I'm sure Trump would be happy to give him some role that doesn't involve Senate confirmation because he knows Gaetz will do anything he asks. And we have seen that of Donald Trump basically handing out appointments or ambassadorships to people who he knows are going to be loyalists, and especially to positions that aren't Senate confirmable. Trump has so far handed out positions. I believe today Herschel Walker, ambassador to the Bahamas, if I'm not mistaken. We've seen Carrie Lake get some ambassadorship. Really, anybody who has ever shown any loyalty or deference to Trump over the last several years has been rewarded with a spot in government, not because they're qualified, not because they're competent, not because they deserve the spot, but rather because they've done the one thing that Donald Trump is seeking from them, which is to show undying fealty to the God King. With that said, let's take a brief moment here for a little palate cleanser, and we have a visitor. Come here, buddy. Okay, Aston's here. We have the mascot. Okay. He still has some bandages on him. I don't know if you can see them. I think you can't see them because the camera is too low. But he's got some bandages on him here because he had a couple things removed. So, in any case, that's our midstream palate cleanser. Okay, I'm going to answer some questions now that I'm getting in the chat. So going a little bit back here, have you discussed Section 3 of the Constitution recently? No one has ever ruled that he could legally take office, right? So I have, well, actually there was a ruling by the Supreme Court that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is not going to apply to Trump. Remember, there was a judge in California, Judge Wallace. There was a trial judge in Colorado, followed by the Colorado Supreme Court, all of whom ruled that Donald Trump was disqualified for office based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And that question was elevated up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled that it did not apply to Donald Trump, and so that basically negated any argument, because they're the final arbiter of this stuff, negated any argument that we might have had where Donald Trump couldn't legally take office. So is it legit? I mean, it's legit insofar as the Supreme Court is the final arbiter of these things. Is it legit in terms of that's what the Constitution says? No, but our protestations and and $10 will get you a foot long at Subway. Hey, stay here, buddy. Okay, there we go. All right, he's over it. He doesn't care about the fame. He's too old for this shit. That's not okay. Why have a constitution if they're going to ignore it? It's the right question. The reality is that the plain text of the 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, would prohibit somebody who has engaged in, or running for office again, who has engaged in or aided those or given comfort to those who have engaged in insurrection. That is exactly what Donald Trump did. Did it matter? No. I get it. It undermines our whole argument for saying that we have to defer to the Constitution when the Supreme Court justices can just make up the Constitution as they like, but that is the reality that we live in right now. Okay, very important question. Is Aston a loud barker or is he quiet? He's very quiet. You wouldn't know he was here. Here's one story about Aston. He never barks except when somebody's at the door. That's it. Otherwise, he's dead silent, never makes a sound. And I bring this dog everywhere with me. And one time I decided, and I would bring him to the movies too. So we were at some AMC theater watching some movie, and we always brought him. I would always bring this dog to the movies because I don't care. I will bring him anywhere. I brought him to the supermarket. I'll bring him with me wherever we're going, and he's always right next to me. And I brought him into the movies one time, and it was like the 10th time that I brought him to the movies. Nobody cares, especially out in Los Angeles. Everybody has their dog attached to them like appendages, and brought him into the movies. It was a horror movie. I think it was like one of those where there's like 10 different ones, like 10 different iterations of the same movie. I can't remember what it's called. I'm sure somebody's gonna write it in the comments and it'll come back to me. But a doorbell rings in the movie and Aston starts barking in the theater, and the guy in front of me goes, "This motherfucker bring a dog into the movies?" And it was like the first time I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't bring the dog with me everywhere I go. It wasn't Saw, it wasn't Scream. It was like one of the new franchise where where the old lady is I can't remember. I mean, me saying it was the scary movie with the old lady, but anyway, Aston goes wherever I go, and yeah, he'll bark if there is a doorbell. It doesn't matter if it's a digital doorbell. It doesn't matter if it's a movie doorbell. It doesn't matter if it's an IRL doorbell. He will bark at it, and that's the only time he'll bark. And yeah, so that's my story of bringing Aston to the movies. Okay, back to politics here. I think it's also worth talking about for Insidious. That is the movie franchise. We were in an Insidious movie, and one of like the 10 Insidious movies, and he started barking. So yeah. Okay, I'll keep answering questions now. So you can go ahead and throw them in the chat if you have them. Hey, buddy. He's over it. Okay, let's talk about President Elon. I think that is a good idea here. Obviously, President Elon, he has allowed his sidekick, Donald Trump, the vice president, to make at least something of an appearance over these last couple of days, which is super nice of him to kind of share some of the spotlight. But otherwise, President Elon has really been doing his level best to make sure to sabotage the government. Right now, Congress so here's how it worked. Congress had this continuing resolution to be able to raise the debt ceiling so that the government could stay open. They needed buy-in from some Democrats because some Republicans were coming out and saying that they wouldn't. It's Republican anarchists, right? Arsonists coming out and saying that they wouldn't support it unless it was extreme to the nth degree. Inherently within that, then, you need some Democrats to be able to compensate for the fact that there are not enough Republicans to be able to pass this alone. When you get buy-in from Democrats, you have to give them some stuff. You have to make concessions to those Democrats. When you make concessions, it's going to push more Republicans away, and those Republicans will complain about it. But the reason that they had to make those concessions in the first place is because not enough Republicans within their own party were able to pass it onto themselves. And so they have this vicious cycle where more Republicans step away. That means to get buy-in from Democrats, you have to make concessions, which pushes more Republicans away. They do not know how to govern. This is a constant theme that we see with Republicans who are trying to keep the government open. Anyway, they negotiate something. It has enough support, presumably among both members of both parties in Congress. Then at the 11th hour, Trump comes in. By the way, the government's going to shut down in 2 days if there's not funding. Then President Elon comes out and says that there shouldn't be anything done until January 20th when Trump comes into office. Trump and Vance come out and say that they don't support the continuing resolution. And so now the onus is on Mike Johnson to figure out some way to keep the government open or not, knowing full well that unless he accedes to Trump's demands, which, by the way, Trump is not the president yet, and he has no vested interest in keeping the government open because it's not going to impact him. Really, unless he can figure out some way to do that, the government is going to shut down through the winter here. And this is one more instance where even when they have control in the House, they are not able to do the bare minimum, which is just to keep the government open right now. So do I think that we'll see a government shutdown? It depends on whether Mike Johnson is going to defer to his responsibility to keep the government open, to make sure that people continue getting paid over the holidays. Like, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of government employees who, I don't know, might want a paycheck over the holidays to be able to afford gifts and food and rent. And it might help if they're able to keep the government open so that they can get exactly that. The flip side of that is that Trump doesn't give a shit, couldn't care less. Elon doesn't give a shit. It's not like they're not going to be able to afford the cost of living without these paychecks. And so they want the government shut down because they traffic in this kind of anarchy. Well, at least Trump does. Elon literally does not know how the government works, and he's learning in real time as he's been imbued the powers of the presidency by Trump. So it depends what Mike Johnson decides to do. If he wants to keep his promise to the people who expect paychecks, then he'll keep the government open. Or he will just completely kowtow to whatever Trump wants and kind of bend the knee to him, and Trump gets the anarchy he's looking for, and the government does shut down. So if you're asking me which one I would predict is going to happen, I would say, honestly, 50-50 at this point. Is that a helpful answer? Probably not. But the reality is that the fact is that even me saying that there is a whole 50% chance, 1 in 2, heads or tails, that the government will shut down just by virtue of the fact that even though Republicans have control, that the president, who isn't the president yet, of their own party is sabotaging their own bill, that's crazy. And I think we lose track of how crazy it is just by virtue of the fact that the Overton window shifts so quickly, and we just adapt to all of this stuff as it's happening so quickly. But the reality is that is nuts, that even though Republicans control the House, the fact that a Republican incoming president wants to sabotage their ability to keep the government open ahead of his taking office really does go to show that this is the kind of chaos we are looking at as the Trump administration continues to get closer and closer. I would also take this opportunity, as just a quick aside, if you are not yet part of my Discord, I just started a Discord, and we're doing like a soft launch right now, so only people who are watching this stream and a few previous streams have joined. So if you use Discord and you want to be a part of this one, again, we haven't gone wide on it. It's just kind of like beta testing it right now and figuring out some of the kinks and figuring out what works, what we want to change, and whatnot. We have really amazing, helpful mods in there who are helping build and put this whole thing together. But if you want to join the Discord, I just pinned it, or it's pinned at the top of the chat in the comments section here. So go ahead and click that. Only if you want to. No sweat if you can't. But different, kind of. I think it's important as we kind of enter this new phase of what our media environment is looking like to make sure that it's expanded beyond just what we would normally see on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. That there are more people deeper in the depths of the internet than Democrats usually feel comfortable going. So I think Discord is a good way, a good step in terms of getting there. who would actually stand up to him at this point? Well, see, that's the difficult part about that is Elon. It was Elon who came out and posted something today, and he posts so goddamn much that I don't even know if I'll be able to find it. But let me see if I can, because this tweet I think is really indicative of a problem that we are going to be contending with. So let me just get through his 12,000 interesting yup and 100s. I mean, this guy really is just a master poster. You've never seen posting this good. Just him saying yes. Oh God, this is like my hell. All of this is just the last 4 hours. If I had, I'm sorry, but if I had all the money in the world, the last place I would be is posting on Twitter all fucking day. Damn, where is it? There's a, what is happening? Just Elon posting the word retard over. This guy is so desperate to be cool, but he's like, his mental state is stuck in like 2002. All right. In any case, I'm going to have to paraphrase it because I don't know that I have the time, and I don't know that you all have the energy to see me just try to find any single tweet by Elon Musk, because he does not log off. But basically what Elon said is something along the lines of that anybody who doesn't, accede to his demands should be primaried. And the reality is that, let's see, man, I wanted to find it. But okay, in any case, I gave you the Cliff Notes version of it, that they should primary anybody who doesn't like accede to his demands. And the reality is that he has the money to fund primary challengers for anybody who does that. And so really, in terms of, the question that I got was is anybody going to be willing to stand up to Trump? And the reality is that the answer is probably no, because now Trump has, President Elon's checkbook to be able to use. And if anybody upsets him or doesn't kiss the ring or doesn't toe the line properly or appropriately, then Trump and Elon will just pool their money to make sure that they get somebody who's better than that person as a primary challenger, who will do the business of kowtowing to Trump and showing nothing but fealty to the God King. And so that is a major problem in this media environment, where when you have not only money in politics, but an unlimited bank account at the hands of somebody who kind of wants to have all of this power as the shadow president, which Elon is, then I don't see a Republican Party where there is any incentive structure to push back on Trump's worst impulses or most extreme impulses. So as far as Republicans are concerned, do I have any hope that we're going to see like some bulwark within the party against him, that we're going to see some Mitt Romney faction of Republicans? It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen, because all of these people know that their jobs are at stake at the hands of somebody for whom spending a few $1,000,000 is no big deal, especially if it means he gets full control of a very Trumpified MAGA Republican Party that's going to be willing to do his bidding. So the only move here moving forward is just to replace these people with Democrats, because the Republicans will never be willing to stand up to Trump. So that's our job. That's my job. It's our job to make sure that we that we all do the work of messaging people as we head toward 2026 of why it's so important to make sure that Democrats do have some semblance of power to act as a check against the Republican Party that is wholly owned by Trump and Elon Musk. So, that's what the work is. The work is just making sure that we persuade enough people out there in this country that, okay, you might have voted for Republicans in the past because they said they were going to enact some or implement some big populist agenda. But just like the first time, there is no populist agenda that Trump is looking to implement here. I mean, Trump came into office the first time saying that he was going to pass some big infrastructure bill, that he was going to pass some big healthcare bill, that he was going to usher in some American jobs boom, that he was going to pass a tax cut for the middle class. He did none of those things. All he did was pass a tax cut for millionaires and billionaires. That's it. And he swept into office along the same lines where he said, I'm going to lower costs. And what was the very first thing he did when it came time to suggesting that he's going to lower costs? He said, actually, on second thought, it's probably not that easy to get grocery prices down. And so we already see him hedging here. And so the notion that he's going to be the guy to kind of make good on these populist promises undermines everything that Trump has done before and everything that he's doing right now, which is to say that he's not interested in helping working class people in America. And in fact, I can guarantee you that their number one priority is going to be passing an extension of the 2017 tax cut, where 83% of the benefits were conferred to the richest Americans, millionaires and billionaires. And that's going to be why they're in office. I mean, they sweep into office every election cycle under this pretense that the biggest issue facing Americans is that trans people are doing this and that gay people are walking into bathrooms, and they are so good at waging culture war issues as a distraction to prevent people from waging class warfare. And the reality is that in terms of the class that Republicans protect, you don't have to look far. I mean, there is a reason that the shadow president right now is Elon Musk, the literal richest man in the world. It's no secret who this guy is pandering to in terms of who Donald Trump's focus is. Look at his cabinet, 14 billionaires so far. I think maybe 11, 12, 30, something like that. Anyway, about a dozen billionaires in his cabinet. This is not somebody who is focused on the concerns of the working class. And I think that the fact is that we're going to see really soon that it's not going to be the price of eggs that Donald Trump is focused on. He's not going to support any legislation that would prevent price gouging. That's not his priority. In fact, far from that, we may see Trump's FTC renege on Lena Khan, her ability to block the Kroger-Albertsons merger for grocery stores. And then we'll see, and if they do allow that to go through, then we'll see prices continue to surge. If Trump makes good on his promises to enact these tariffs, then again we'll see prices surge. So Trump isn't worried about the cost of goods for regular people, and I can guarantee you that his priority is not going to be doing things that will bring the cost of goods down. He's going to be doing things where he can flex his ego and try to win, or try to be some big grandiose deal maker, when in actuality the impact, the consequence of those actions is going to be that prices actually go up. All the while, his priority is going to be making sure that rich people pay less taxes. That's going to be his focus. Tax cuts permit people to keep more of their income, plain and simple. When you are conferring all of these tax advantages to the wealthiest people in this country, look, I'm not advocating for anybody to raise taxes on people making less than $400,000 a year, but I am advocating so that we can actually bring in federal revenue to make sure that we are raising taxes among people who can afford to pay more. Remember, the corporate tax rate was slashed down to 21% when Trump was in office last, I believe down from 35%. We also have the lowest personal income tax rate that we've had in I believe this is probably the lowest that we've had maybe in the last century, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you go back to the 40s and 50s, it was up to 90%. Not to say that I'm advocating for a tax rate that's up to 90%, but let's not pretend that the 36.5% tax rate that we have for the highest earners here is predatory by any means, certainly relative to the rest of history. So, but we need to be able to tax those who can afford to pay more, to be able to fund programs that will benefit the rest of America. This is you paying your fair share for a country that has afforded you every ability to make a ton of money and give back to that very country, so that we can have programs that make sure to keep people fed and housed and to continue perpetuating and promoting a functional society here. Do I buy the argument? This is interesting. Do I buy the argument that Kyle Kulinski and others have made that Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are the two main people to blame for Trump's victory, because had the original Build Back Better bill passed, then that would have been enough for working people to feel good about the economy in spite of global inflation? It's a good idea, and it may very well check out. The flip side of that is there was a lot of good that was done for working people in this country. Remember, we did have the American Rescue Plan. We did have the Inflation Reduction Act, rural broadband, mostly for people who are living in red areas. We have healthcare costs capped at $2,000, inhalers and insulin capped at $35. We have the PACT Act, which gave healthcare to veterans. We have the CHIPS Act, which led to an explosion of domestic manufacturing. We have the infrastructure law, which of course, fixed bridges and roads across the country. We have the gun safety law, which has helped bring down gun violence about 10% from the year before. So we have the elimination of junk fees. We have what Lena Khan has done at the FCC, click to cancel, blocked mergers that would have sent grocery prices higher. There is a lot that was done. The elimination of junk fees at banks. We have automatic refunds for airline cancellations. There is a lot that was done on top of 16 million jobs being added, the stock market at a record high, unemployment at a 50-year low. So to claim that there isn't already enough ingredients to make working people feel good about the economy kind of ignores the environment that we're in right now. But the reality is that we are in an information environment where so many people don't feel the effects of what's happening just by virtue of what they're being told over and over. There's this pretty famous poll that showed that the vast majority of Americans feel good about their personal financial situation, but feel bad about the national financial situation. And so that's an instance where even if they are doing well financially unto themselves, that because of the reporting that we've seen from doomers who are basically want to convey a narrative that America is doing poorly, they're going to feel bad about the environment more broadly. Which, by the way, that's half of it. I do think ultimately, because of inflation, we're in this global environment of inflation, we were in a punishment election right now. And I don't know that we could have put the best candidate forward, that we would have won regardless. And that's not something we could have done anything about, because there's no way to stem the tide of global inflation in the aftermath of COVID. But the point I'm trying to make is that even, regardless of how many wins Democrats were to notch, on one hand, I don't know that it would have mattered because inflation was so painful. On the second hand, even if we were able to pass this stuff because we had Republicans beating the drum over and over and over about how everything was so prohibitively expensive and how this is the worst economy in the history of the world and Joe Biden is to blame for everything, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how many more wins we could have notched where it would have mattered. I mean, there were already objectively a lot of wins that Democrats did notch, and it didn't matter. One, it didn't matter because it didn't break through in the media environment. And two, it didn't matter because people didn't care because prices of certain things, like stuff in the grocery store, was more expensive. And so that's what they focused on. And I get it. I get how, we can say there was rural broadband that was implemented for people who needed it, and that's some small faction of the population, a not insignificant faction of the population, certainly if you're one of those people who benefit from it. But a hell of a lot more people in this country face high prices in grocery stores than benefit from this idea of expanded rural broadband. A hell of a lot more people in this country contend with high prices at grocery stores than benefit from reduced prices for inhalers or insulin. Again, not to say that these successes weren't great, because they were, but the fact is that at scale, a lot more people were implemented by high prices. So ultimately, I don't know that had the original Build Back Better passed, that it would have made a huge difference, because I think at the end of the day, we were destined for an economy where people were just hurting as the result of global inflation, and there was nothing to do to push back against that. And we can notch all the wins in the world and pass all this great legislation in the world in addition to the list that I just laid out, and I don't know that it would have mattered. So that's the reality of it. At least that's just my opinion. Are we going to see all the media hysterical looking at what the orange guy is tweeting and truthing out, or do we learn that that's only playing into his narcissistic needs? So I think the question here is, are we going to do what we did the first time around? Every time Trump tweets or truths or whatever it is, that stops the presses and we have to cover it. I think two things. I think one is his posts they just don't carry that much weight anyway. Certainly not the way that they did during his first term in office. So I think that there is just a general sense of exhaustion with what Donald Trump says. So I don't think that every tweet is going to be covered in the same way that it was during the first term. And the second thing is that I do think it's incumbent upon us on the left to make sure to make sure to pick our battles, basically, to know which hills to die on. That if everything feels like a 5-alarm fire, and I've said this before, that nothing feels like a 5-alarm fire. So we have to know where to focus our attention, knowing full well that we have limited political capital, we have a limited ability to command attention from people who are tuning in. And if we are screaming about 10 different things that day, then ultimately nothing sticks. And by the way, if we're screaming about 10 things that have happened that day, that is by design. Republicans love to ascribe to this Steve Bannon model of flooding the zone with shit. And that allows them to scatter Democrats because they know that we're going to fall for everything. And that if Trump, commits 10 atrocities and Democrats go in 10 different directions screaming about every single one, then really nothing garners the attention that it deserves. And so I think it's going to be incumbent upon us moving forward to figure out which of these things to focus on and which of these things to allow to fall by the wayside. And it's a shame that there's going to have to be anything that falls by the wayside, but that's the political environment that we live in right now. Do I think Trump will eventually get tired of all the attention Elon is getting and push him out? There's a non-zero chance that he probably will. And, 15 minutes ago, I called him President Elon, and I don't think that that is necessarily an off-base thing to do if you're trying to exacerbate that inevitability. So do I think Trump is probably going to get... it depends. The benefit of Trump being able to benefit from Elon's unlimited supply of money may be enough to allow him to sacrifice just a little bit of the spotlight to Elon. But Trump also has money, and he also has all of the power consolidated onto himself, so he might not need it, and he might not be willing to allow Elon to really get the spotlight. But either way, I think if you do want to piss Trump off, a not impossible way to do that might be acknowledging that the president here is Elon Musk and not Donald Trump. Oh, what's the matter, buddy? Oh, I have a dog that is you could just see the top of his ear right there. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Okay. This is two visits in one stream. This is another palate cleanser here. I feel like you can only talk about Elon Musk so much before you just need that palate cleanser. So Aston is back. Does the large number of Democrats checking out of politics alarm you? I have many in my life who've done the same. It doesn't alarm me. I understand it. I I understand it. It doesn't surprise me at all. I think what would surprise me more is if Democrats didn't check out. It's been a long year. There's a few factors at play. It's been a long year. It's exhausting to know that all of the time and energy and money that was spent to try to get Democrats elected didn't work out at the top of the ticket. And also we weren't able to gain majorities in either House of Congress. But at the same time, look, it's the holidays. Not a ton is happening, although there is, if you're a political freak like us, then you're still going to pay attention. But if ever there was a moment to check out, this is probably the one where, where this is probably the moment where it makes the most sense to do that, which is fine. Look, I think that people, if you need to take the time, do it. Take time, rest, get recharged and re-energized for 2024. I think there's going to be a natural reversion back to the mean. I think people are going to tune in back in 2025 anyway, when the lunacy of the Trump administration, the chaos of the Trump administration inevitably kicks in. So I'm not worried about it. I do hope, if by February or March people aren't back, then I'll be a little bit worried, because the last thing that we want to do is offer him kind of a blank slate with no pushback to be able to do whatever he wants and kind of enact the worst aspects of his agenda. So that's what worried me. But right now, December 18th, 2024, like the end of the year, it's the holidays. Wait. Where are you going? What are you doing? It's the holidays, and what are you doing, sweetheart? You want to go down? Okay. So no, I'm not surprised at all. I think if people, are looking for a time to kind of collect themselves and tune out for a bit, this is the natural time to do that. For those asking, yes, that is a Band-Aid. He had a few like things like skin tags and stuff removed, so there's a Band-Aid on him. All right, and let's finish off with this, because I think this is a point that I brought up yesterday during the live stream, and I want to bring up today again, and that is the notion that AOC was passed over for Jerry Connolly. I want to caveat this by saying, so AOC and Jerry Connolly were both vying for the ranking spot on the House Oversight Committee. Oversight is going to be the main place where Republicans are going to try to enact the most extreme elements of their agenda. It is going to be where there's a lot of attention. A lot of the more popular or brash, outspoken members of the Republican Party are on oversight. And so there will be a lot of attention on this committee. Jerry Connolly, 74 years old. I believe he has throat cancer, was running against AOC, probably the most effective communicator in the Democratic Party. And Jerry Connolly won out over AOC. And I have no beef with Jerry Connolly. And in fact, he's been really... he is really effective when I've seen him in these committees in the past. So my beef isn't with Jerry Connolly. My beef is that there are very few people in the Democratic Party who are able to command attention. Bear in mind, we live in an attention economy. That is your biggest source of capital, the ability to get people to pay attention. Which is not to say that somebody can't be an effective communicator, an effective legislator, because I do believe that Jerry Connolly is, but AOC has an ability that damn near no other Democrat has, and that is when she talks, people listen. It is really fucking hard to get to a point where we have someone like that. Republicans have a few. Donald Trump is like that for Republicans. When he talks, they listen. He makes news. He has the power to move markets. They have a few people like that. Democrats don't have that many people. AOC is the number one person we have who can do that, who is not only an effective communicator, of which we have a few, but she has the ability to garner attention, which very, very, very few Democrats have. And we had the ability to put her atop the the Oversight Committee, and we opted not to, thereby relegating ourselves into, yet again, into obscurity in terms of what is going to break through in this kind of media environment. And again, that's not to say that Jerry Connolly won't do a good job, because I believe he will, but it's not about him being able to do a good job. It is about AOC's ability to break through in a media environment where we need somebody who can garner attention. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to take seriously the notion that Democrats are willing to embrace generational change. And we saw how that has bitten us in the ass with sticking with Joe Biden. We saw how that's bitten us in the ass with Ruth Bader Ginsburg not stepping aside before she died on the bench during Trump's administration. We have seen over and over Democrats die in office or have these committee spots where they have the ability to garner all the attention in the same way that Jim Jordan does for Republicans, James Comer does for Republicans. We keep putting really, really old people in charge who aren't able to command the same degree of attention, or certainly nowhere near the same degree of attention, or who aren't even effective communicators as younger Democrats are. And our unwillingness to embrace the idea of generational change bit us in the ass with the Biden situation. And, I think like there is a sense of understanding now that, look, this is very much Monday morning quarterbacking, but there is an understanding now that had Biden stepped aside, that would have been our only chance at success moving forward. Do I think it would have mattered? I'm not even sure, because again, as I mentioned 10 minutes ago, I think that this was an election where really people were looking to punish those in charge because of high prices due to inflation, and they were going to punish the Democrats. Maybe if we had a Democrat that was so not aligned with Joe Biden, like for example his own vice president, they would have been more effective at doing so. Who knows? But in any case, there is something to be said for Democrats understanding that in this moment where, especially where we need to be expanding our tent among young people, that when all of our leaders are in their 70s and 80s, maybe that's not the most effective way to do that. And certainly not the most effective way to do that in a media environment where, look, let's be honest, I don't know that people are going to tune in to hear what Jerry Connolly has to say. I don't know they're going to tune in to see what Maxine Waters has to say, or what Dick Durbin has to say, or what, like the list goes on and on, Jerry Nadler has to say. And so our unwillingness to recognize the media environment that we're in killed us in this past election cycle, and I think it's going to continue to kill us until we finally take seriously this idea that if we want to succeed in this media environment, we have to be able to do that in a way where we finally embrace the people who are able to actually garner attention, and AOC is chief among them. So, give me 1 second. I have to let this dog out. All right. There we go. So that is just like a piece of news here that I hope the Democrats will eventually learn, but right now it doesn't seem that they are that they're willing to embrace the lessons thus far. So, okay. How do we make sure voters are educated and knowledgeable? I think it's just doing the work every day, getting in front of more people as much as we can. Look, I know that you all know that since the day after the election, I've been streaming as much as I can. That is why I'm on Twitch, for example. So I would just ask, if you're watching this right now and you're not yet following me, please give me a follow, support independent progressive media. We have to do everything we can to build up an infrastructure that can try and compete with what they have on the right. We have a little bit of time right now to figure out how to build up that infrastructure in the most effective way. But the reality is that we pale in comparison to what they have built on the right, and what Republican elected officials have done to embrace and nurture their ecosystem. And so it's twofold, right? It's making sure that all you out here who are watching this continue to support independent progressive media, but then also that our Democratic elected officials embrace independent media and stop conferring all of their goodwill, attention, and time to legacy media. The same legacy media, by the way, that turns around and shits on them the moment they have the opportunity to do so, or that take their cues from the right. And so what you're left with is, the liberal media in the New York Times doing 69 cover stories on Hillary's emails, for example. So, okay. We will leave it there. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, if you haven't yet had the opportunity to follow along, please make sure to do so. Also, in the pinned comment is the link to my Discord. I think it's still pinned there. I'm not exactly sure. But if you have the ability to follow along with the Discord, that would be a big help too. Right now, it's just the OGs in the Discord. It's not launched wide. It's just people who have followed the last few streams that are going to be like the OGs in this thing. So eventually it's going to be released wide, and hopefully we'll have, tens or hundreds of thousands of people who are in there. But right now it's just a couple hundred. And so help me out, jump in, be one of the founding members here, and we'll get this thing off the ground and try to expand independent progressive media that way. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. And we'll do it again soon. Okay. And